I watched as my cherished Victorian home was reduced to ashes, with my HOA neighbor, Karen, smugly sipping her coffee, thinking she'd finally won our long-standing battle. Little did she know, I'm a federal judge with the authority to dismantle everything she's built. The real question was, how far would she push me before I revealed who I truly am? Comment below where you're watching from. The morning started like any other. I was sitting on my grandmother's century-old porch swing, savoring my coffee, watching the sunrise cast a soft pink glow over the Victorian house's purple trim. That's when I saw her, Karen Thompson, briskly power-walking towards my mailbox, clutching an envelope in her well-manicured hands like it was the most precious thing in the world. I'd seen that determined look before. It came out at neighborhood meetings, the ones she had started hosting in her newly renovated McMansion next door. My stomach tightened as I watched her drop the envelope into my mailbox, lingering just long enough to take photos of my front yard with her phone. My grandmother's roses were in full bloom, their wild beauty standing in sharp contrast to Karen's perfectly manicured boxwood hedges. I knew she despised every untamed petal. Inside the envelope was what she called an exciting opportunity. A formal invitation to join their newly formed HOA. Attached was a glossy brochure showing rows of identical beige houses with matching mailboxes. The membership fee was a hefty $5,000, with monthly dues of $350. But that wasn't what made my hands shake. No, it was the list of mandatory property modifications. Remove all non-approved paint colors, including my grandmother's beloved Ito purple trim. Replace the heritage rose garden with approved vegetation, and take down the antique wind chimes that had sung me to sleep every night since childhood. I watched Karen through the window as she walked back to her house, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, I just delivered the final invitation," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "She has to join now. Her house is the last holdout on the block. Once we get her property in line, the neighborhood value will skyrocket." That evening, I walked over to Karen's house, invitation in hand. Her doorbell played a cheerful version of "We Are the Champions." Of course it did. She answered the door, wearing a neighborhood watch captain badge. Her lips stretched into a smile that I'm sure she thought looked welcoming. "I've reviewed your invitation," I said calmly, my years of professional experience helping me keep my voice steady. "I must decline. This house has been in my family for 3 generations, and I intend to preserve its historic integrity." Her smile vanished faster than cookies at a bake sale. "You don't understand," she said, leaning forward. "This isn't really an invitation. The HOA's already been registered. Your property is surrounded by HOA members. You have to join." I pulled out the property maps I'd researched earlier that afternoon. "Actually, that's not true," I replied. "My deed predates any HOA agreements, and I have no legal obligation to join." Karen's face turned an interesting shade of red. "Listen here," she hissed, dropping the fake sweetness. "This neighborhood is changing. Progress is happening. If you don't get with the program, things could get difficult. Accidents happen to houses that don't meet code, citations get filed, fines add up." I locked eyes with her. "Is that a threat, Mrs. Thompson?" She stepped back, her sugary smile returning. "Of course not," she said. I could tell Karen's concern was more about property values and safety, of course. She mentioned how old houses like mine could be unpredictable, electrical issues, structural problems. It would be a shame if something happened because I refused to modernize. Behind her, I could see her husband watching from the window, phone in hand. Something about his posture unsettled me. I nodded politely and started to walk away, but Karen called after me. "You have 1 week," she said. 1 week to reconsider before the HOA board meets to discuss enforcement options." As I walked back to my house, I noticed unfamiliar faces peeking through windows. Likely Karen's HOA allies. A feeling in my gut told me this wouldn't be as simple as just declining the invitation. That night, I set up security cameras around my property, making sure to document everything. I learned to trust my instincts, and right now, they were telling me that Karen Thompson wasn't done yet. What I didn't know at that time was that this wasn't just about property values or purple trim. In my 30 years of dealing with difficult individuals, I had never encountered someone like Karen. As I fell asleep to the soothing sound of my grandmother's wind chimes, I had no idea that this was just the beginning of a war that would change everything, and that my beloved Victorian home would be the first casualty. Karen, however, had made a critical mistake in choosing me as her target. She just didn't know it yet. The next morning began with Karen's shrill voice coming from outside my window. "Look at those hideous purple trims. They're ruining our property values." I peeked through the curtains to find her leading a group of HOA members on their morning inspection. My heart sank as I watched them photographing every detail of my grandmother's beloved home. I tried to enjoy my morning coffee on the porch, but their whispers carried across the lawn. "Did you see those ancient wind chimes? They're not HOA approved. And those roses, they're 3 inches taller than regulation." Every day brought new complaints, each one more absurd than the last. They started leaving bright orange warning letters on my door, citing violations that didn't exist before their HOA. My grandmother's heritage rose garden, which she'd lovingly planted, was now labeled a neighborhood nuisance. The authentic Victorian purple trim, once admired by tourists, was their biggest target. One Tuesday morning, I found Karen measuring my grass with a ruler. 11.5 inches, she announced triumphantly to her sidekick, Barbara, who hastily scribbled in her notebook. "That's 3.5 inches over code." I walked out calmly, coffee in hand. "You're trespassing on private property," I said firmly, aware of my legal rights but keeping my profession private. Karen just smirked and snapped more photos. The harassment became more inventive. They scheduled landscapers to arrive at 7 a.m. on Saturdays with their equipment positioned strategically near my bedroom window, making sure the noise was deafening. Anonymous complaints to code enforcement turned into a weekly occurrence. Each time, I calmly showed the officials my property's historic status documentation, watching Karen seethe from her window. They tried psychological tactics next. Karen organized HOA meetings in her driveway, just outside my home office. I'd overhear them discussing how certain homes were ruining the neighborhood's reputation and how those properties needed to be dealt with. My security cameras captured them repeatedly testing my patience. They would let their dogs use my yard as a bathroom and then act surprised when I showed them the footage. "Oh, my precious Bentley would never," Karen would gasp, clutching her pearls while her massive golden doodle left another gift on my lawn. The breaking point came during the annual block party. I wasn't invited, of course, but I could hear Karen's voice carrying through the air as she loudly discussed her plans to revitalize the neighborhood. "Some of these older properties," she said, casting a glance at my home, "just don't fit the community vision anymore." That's when I noticed some people taking pictures of my house's foundation, whispering about structural concerns. I stayed composed, documenting everything. Every letter, every photo, and all the anonymous complaints. I filed them all carefully. When they installed bright security lights aimed directly at my bedroom windows, I added light pollution to my growing file. My grandmother had taught me the value of patience, and as Karen's group grew bolder, I knew the time to act would come. Later that night, while reviewing my security footage, I saw something unsettling. 2 HOA board members were out by my property line, whispering about easement regulations. I recognized that look. They were scheming something bigger. But what they didn't realize was that I'd spent my career dealing with people who believed they were above the law. As I turned off my porch light that evening and watched Karen's group huddle in her driveway, I began to wonder how long I should wait before revealing to them just who they were messing with. I never expected to find Karen and 2 other HOA board members sneaking around my property at midnight, but there they were, lit up by my kitchen light. As I got up for a glass of water, my heart stopped when I saw that they were holding chemical sprayers, aiming them directly at my grandmother's century-old rose garden. "What do you think you're doing?" I called out from the porch, phone already recording. Karen jumped but quickly regained her composure, that fake smile spreading across her face like poison. "Oh, we're just helping to eliminate these invasive species," she said sweetly, continuing to spray my roses. "The HOA has strict rules about non-native plants. If you just join us, we could handle these issues properly." I walked closer, my blood boiling, but my voice steady. "Those aren't invasive species, Karen. Those are heritage Victorian. Roses planted by my grandmother in 1960. I have the original documentation and Gardening Society registration." The other board members shifted uncomfortably, but Karen stood her ground. "Well, someone complained about the smell," she sniffed, adjusting her designer pajamas. "And these thorns are a safety hazard for children walking by on my private property, behind my fence. Ew, hiss."